They say the sins of yesterday never truly die. They wait in silence, ready to return when you least expect them. This is the story of Adaora, a woman who thought she had buried her past, only to discover that the choices of her youth would come back, shaking the very foundation of her life. Grab your seat, because this tale will remind you that the truth always rises. Adaora grew up in a small town where every young girl's dream was either to marry a rich man or to escape to the city and build a life that would make her name known. She was not the kind of girl to sit quietly and let life decide for her. From a young age, she was clever, ambitious, and strikingly beautiful. People often whispered that her beauty would open doors for her, but Adaora believed beauty alone was not enough. One had to know how to use it. Her family was poor. Her father had died when she was barely 10, leaving her mother to raise 3 children alone. They struggled to survive, depending on small trading and farming to get by. Many nights, Adaora went to bed hungry, her stomach aching but her mind awake, dreaming of glittering streets and tall buildings she had only seen in pictures. She promised herself that she would never live and die in poverty like her parents. She would write a different story. At 16, Adaora caught the attention of young men in the town. Some came with gifts of food. Others promised her comfort if she would agree to be theirs. But Adaora was not satisfied with small offers. She wanted more. She wanted the city, the fashion, the parties, the opportunities. And soon, she found her way. By 18, Adaora left home. She told her mother she was going to work in a boutique, but in truth, she had no job waiting for her. She carried only her ambition and her beauty as weapons. When she arrived in the city, it was overwhelming. Loud horns, crowded streets, and people who seemed to always be in a hurry. For a moment, fear crept into her heart, but Adaora shook it off. She had not come this far to return a failure. It was in the city that she met Chitty. Chitty was a young man, just a few years older than her, who worked as a clerk in a law office. Unlike the flashy men Adaora often admired, Chitty was simple, kind, and hardworking. He had dreams of becoming a lawyer one day, and he often spoke about building a better country where justice would be fair for everyone. Adaora found his passion strange but attractive. Soon, they grew close, and before long, he became her first real love. For a while, Adaora lived differently. She stayed with Chitty in his small apartment, helped him cook simple meals, and listened to him talk about his dreams. She found comfort in his steady nature, though part of her heart still longed for more than he could provide. When Chitty looked at her, he saw a woman who could be his partner in life, a woman he could build a future with. But when Adaora looked at him, she saw a stepping stone, a temporary chapter in her bigger story. One day, temptation knocked. A wealthy businessman named Mr. Okeke noticed Adaora at a friend's party. He was impressed not only by her beauty, but also by her boldness. He offered her luxury, cars, clothes, and a lifestyle far above what Chitty could ever give. Adaora's heart wavered. Chitty gave her love and loyalty, but Mr. Okeke promised the city life she had always dreamed of. She began to spend more time with Mr. Okeke, lying to Chitty about where she was. At first, she told herself it was harmless, that she was only networking, making connections. But soon, she was living a double life. Then came the turning point. One evening, while Adaora was with Mr. Okeke, police officers raided the hotel where they were staying. The businessman escaped, but Adaora was caught in the confusion. Drugs were found in the room, drugs she knew nothing about. To avoid being charged, Adaora panicked. When the police questioned her, she mentioned Chitty's name. She told them he had introduced her to the hotel, that he might know about the substances. It was a desperate lie, one she thought would protect her. After all, who would believe a poor clerk over a frightened young woman? The lie grew larger than she expected. Within days, Chitty was arrested. Adaora watched from a distance as her lover, the man who had given her shelter and love, was dragged into a storm he did not deserve. He pleaded his innocence, but her words carried weight. She did not go to the police to correct herself. She did not go to him to confess. Instead, she hardened her heart and told herself it was survival. She had to protect her future. Chitty was sentenced to prison. Adaora never visited him. She told herself it was better to cut all ties, to start afresh. With Mr. Okeke's help, she covered her tracks and moved on. She cried some nights, remembering Chitty's smile, his plans, the way he had believed in her. But she always comforted herself with the thought, it is the price of ambition. Sometimes, you must sacrifice one dream for another. Years passed, and Adaora's star rose. She learned how to dress, how to speak, how to walk into a room and make people turn their heads. She entered business, using connections she built through Mr. Okeke and others like him. Slowly she climbed. She left behind the memory of hunger and struggle. She told no one about Chitty, no one about the lie that had destroyed an innocent man's life. That chapter of her story was locked away, hidden behind the glittering picture she painted of herself. To the world, Adaora was a success story, a girl who had risen from nothing to something. But deep inside, she carried a secret that sometimes kept her awake at night. She told herself the past was gone, that she had outrun it. She did not know that the sins of yesterday were not silent. They wait. They grow. They return when least expected. 15 years had passed since Adaora left behind the chaos of her youth. If anyone had told her then that she would one day live in a quiet neighborhood with a husband and child, she would have laughed. Yet here she was, living a life that looked almost perfect from the outside. Her small but respectable business was thriving. She sold women's fashion, dresses, shoes, and accessories. The shop was popular because she knew how to speak to customers with warmth and confidence. Her neighbors admired her, calling her a role model. In church, she was often invited to speak to young women about discipline, integrity, and ambition. When she stood before them in her graceful dresses and polished smile, no one would have guessed that she once lived recklessly, that she once betrayed the man who had loved her most. Adaora had mastered the art of appearing spotless. Her husband, Emeka, was a kind man. He worked as a civil engineer and had steady contracts with construction companies. He wasn't a wealthy tycoon, but he was reliable, caring, and loyal. Their marriage was not fiery with romance like the city stories she once chased, but it was peaceful, steady, and safe. For Adaora, that was enough. She told herself she had been given a second chance at life, and she was determined not to waste it. Their daughter, Ifeanyi, was 15, a tall, bright-eyed girl with a curious mind and a tender heart. She had inherited Adaora's beauty and Emeka's calm nature. Teachers often praised her brilliance, especially her sharp questions in class. At home, she loved to sit with her mother in the evenings, asking about life, about the world, about how to make the right choices. Adaora was proud of her daughter. In some ways, Ifeanyi was her redemption. Every lesson Adaora had failed to learn in her youth, she now tried to teach her child. Honesty will take you farther than beauty, she would say while braiding her daughter's hair. Greed destroys faster than poverty, she would add when they cooked together. Never lie to save yourself. The truth might be bitter, but it is safer than a lie that will one day explode. Her words were iron, her tone certain. Yet every time she said them, something inside her twisted. She knew she was preaching what she had never practiced. She feared that if her daughter ever discovered her true past, her voice would lose its weight. But she smiled and continued. To Adaora, her past was gone. It belonged to another lifetime, another version of herself. The new Adaora was disciplined, respected, and admired. She believed she had covered her tracks well enough. Yet, sometimes in the stillness of night, she dreamed of Chitty. She saw his face in the courtroom, the hurt in his eyes as the sentence was read. She woke up sweating, guilt pressing down on her chest. Emika would stir beside her and ask, "Are you all right?" She would whisper yes, even when her heart screamed no. But mornings always came with fresh energy. The sun would rise, her shop would open, customers would arrive, and she would slip into her polished role. One Friday morning, she dressed in her best outfit and accompanied Ifeanyi to school for a parent's career day. The school often invited successful men and women to speak to the students about their professions and life choices. Adaora enjoyed such events because it gave her a chance to present herself as the strong, accomplished woman she wanted the world to see. She even prepared a short speech about resilience, about rising from nothing to something, though carefully edited to erase the darker truths. As she walked through the school gate, her daughter holding her hand, Adaora felt a deep satisfaction. This is what life should be, she thought. A clean slate, a chance to guide others away from the mistakes you once made. She sat among other parents in the school hall, listening to the principal welcome everyone. The event began with music from the school choir, followed by short speeches from teachers. Then came the first guest speaker, a medical doctor who shared stories about saving lives in the emergency room. The students clapped excitedly. Adaora smiled at her daughter's glowing face. Ifeanyi scribbled notes eagerly, as though every word was treasure. Adaora's heart swelled with pride. But life has a cruel way of striking when the heart is most content. When the principal announced the second guest speaker, Adaora froze. The name rang like a bell in her ears. Mr. Chitty Okafor, founder of the Freedom Foundation. Her breath caught. The hall erupted in applause as a tall man in a dark suit walked confidently to the stage. Adaora's eyes widened. Though the years had changed him, she knew instantly who he was. Chitty, the man she had loved, the man she had betrayed. He looked older, stronger, his shoulders broad and his presence commanding. His voice, calm and firm, filled the hall as he began to speak about justice, about wrongful imprisonment, about how society must protect the innocent. Students leaned forward, captivated. Teachers nodded in admiration. Parents whispered about his achievements. Adaora sat frozen, her hands cold, her chest heavy. She tried to look away, but her eyes betrayed her, returning again and again to the man she had once destroyed. And then it happened. Chitty's gaze swept across the hall, pausing on different faces. When his eyes reached her, they stopped. For a moment, his expression did not change. He continued speaking, his tone steady, his words powerful. But Adaora knew. She saw it in the sharpness of his eyes, the flicker of recognition. He had seen her. He remembered. Her daughter, oblivious to the storm inside her mother, clapped joyfully at the end of his speech. "Mom, wasn't he amazing?" Ifeanyi whispered excitedly. "I want to meet him. I want to learn from him." Adaora forced a smile, though her lips trembled. "Yes, he was very inspiring," she murmured. But inside, her clean slate had begun to crack. For 15 years, she had told herself her past was gone, erased, forgotten. Yet here he was, the man who carried the weight of her lies, standing proud, successful, and celebrated. He had walked into the hall like a hero, and the walls she had built around her secrets began to crumble brick by brick. Chitty stepped down from the stage, shaking hands with the principal and exchanging warm smiles with other parents. His posture was confident, but his eyes kept flicking toward Adaora. She could feel it, like a shadow that refused to leave. Ifeanyi leaned close, whispering with excitement. "Mom, I have to meet him. Did you hear the way he spoke?" He started with nothing, yet now he helps so many people. That's the kind of person I want to become. Adaora forced her lips into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, darling. He's admirable, she said quietly. But her heart was thundering. The program continued with other speakers, but Adaora barely heard them. Her thoughts were a storm. Memories she had buried clawed their way to the surface. She saw the night of the police raid. She remembered the trembling in her voice as she lied. She heard again the sound of the gavel sentencing Chitty to prison. His face, shocked, betrayed, broken, would not leave her mind. And now here he was, alive, free, respected. How? How had he survived what she caused? The program ended, and parents and students mingled in the courtyard. Chitty was surrounded by people, teachers, parents, and students eager to shake his hand. He spoke to each one warmly, with patience and humility. Adaora tried to leave quickly, tugging her daughter's hand toward the gate. But fate had other plans. Mrs. Emeka, the principal's voice rang out. Please wait. Adaora froze. Slowly, she turned. The principal smiled brightly. Mr. Okafor was asking if he could meet some of our distinguished parents. You run a wonderful fashion business, don't you? I think you two should connect. Adaora's throat went dry. Before she could respond, Chitty was walking toward her, his eyes fixed steadily on her face. Good afternoon, he said calmly, extending his hand. His voice was deep, steady, not angry, but not warm either. Adaora hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. The touch was brief, but enough to send a shiver through her. Good afternoon, she replied, her voice soft. Ifeanyi, oblivious to the tension, jumped in with enthusiasm. Sir, I really enjoyed your speech. You're amazing. I want to learn more about your foundation. Do you take students as volunteers? Chitty smiled at her, his eyes softening. Of course. Young people like you are the future. We need your energy and ideas. He handed her a small card. Come to our office one weekend. We'd be glad to have you. Ifeanyi's face lit up. Thank you, sir. Mom, can I? Please. Adaora's lips quivered. She wanted to scream no, to snatch the card and throw it away. But with the principal and other parents watching, she had no choice. She nodded weakly. Yes, you can, she whispered. Chitty's eyes flickered toward her again. It was a look she couldn't read. Not anger, not forgiveness, but something in between. It pierced through her, reminding her that the past had only been sleeping, not dead. That night, Adaora could not eat. She sat silently at the dinner table, listening to her daughter chatter about the event, about Mr. Okafor, about justice and helping the innocent. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. Emeka, Ifeanyi said excitedly, turning to her father. You should have heard him. He said one person's voice can free many people. Isn't that powerful? Emeka smiled, nodding proudly. It's good for you to be inspired, my daughter. Learn from such people. They are the kind of leaders this country needs. Adaora's spoon clattered against her plate. She quickly excused herself, retreating to the bedroom. There, in the dark, she buried her face in her hands. Guilt roared louder than it had in years. She had worked so hard to bury her mistakes, to rewrite her life. Yet here was proof that the sins of yesterday were never really gone. They lived, waiting for the right moment to rise. And Chitty's eyes, calm yet unyielding, told her clearly, he remembers. The following days were torture. Ifeanyi wouldn't stop talking about the foundation. She visited the website, read articles, and even shared them with her classmates. She called Chitty a hero. To her, he was everything good and noble. To Adaora, he was the living ghost of her betrayal. One evening, as Adaora stood outside her shop closing for the day, she saw a black SUV pull up. Her heart skipped. The window rolled down, and there he was. Chitty. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Her hands shook, but she nodded. She slipped into the passenger seat, and the car pulled away. For a long moment, silence filled the car. Chitty drove calmly, his face unreadable. Adaora's throat was dry. Finally, she whispered, "You've changed." Chitty gave a short laugh, though it held no humor. Prison changes a man. Freedom changes him again. He glanced at her. "I knew I'd see you again someday." Adaora's chest tightened. Chitty ought, but he lifted his hand, silencing her. "Not now? I didn't come to hear excuses. I just wanted you to know I see you, and I remember everything." The car slowed near her street. He stopped, and she stepped out, her knees weak. Before she could speak again, he added, "We'll talk soon. The past always returns, Adaora. You know that." The SUV drove off, leaving her trembling in the night air. Adaora staggered into her house, her heart pounding. She knew now there was no escape. The ghost of her youth had returned, and this time it was not leaving quietly. The morning after her uneasy encounter with Chitty, Adaora woke up with a heaviness in her chest. Her husband Emeka was already gone for work, and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge. For a long while, she just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the words he had spoken in the car. The past always returns. She sat up abruptly when she heard her daughter's cheerful footsteps rushing down the hall. Ifeanyi bounced into the room, school bag on her back, her face glowing with excitement. "Mom, did you know Mr. Okafor has a mentorship program for teenagers? I read about it on his website last night. They teach leadership, community service, even public speaking. I want to apply." Adaora's throat tightened. She forced a smile. "Really? That's good." "Good? Mom, it's amazing," Ifeanyi said, almost twirling in excitement. Imagine being mentored by someone like him. He went through so much, but still rose above it. That's the kind of strength I admire. Adaora looked at her daughter, her pride and joy, and felt her heart ache. If only Ifeanyi knew the truth, that the man she called a hero was the man her mother had betrayed. That evening, the dining table became a battlefield in Adaora's heart. "Daddy," Ifeanyi said between spoonfuls of rice, "can I join Mr. Okafor's program? I think it'll help me grow." Emeka looked up with interest. "That's the lawyer who spoke at your school, right? The one who started a foundation for wrongly accused prisoners." "Yes, Daddy. That's him." Emeka smiled, nodding. "That's a good initiative. Ifeanyi, you should go for it. It will expose you to good values and important people." He turned to Adaora. "What do you think?" Adaora's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Every muscle in her body screamed no. Don't let her near him. But the room was filled with expectant eyes. She forced her lips to curve. "Yes, it sounds good," she said softly. Inside, she was breaking. Days turned into weeks, and Ifeanyi became more involved with Chitty's foundation. She attended weekend workshops, came home with stories of inspirational speeches, and even brought back pamphlets filled with testimonies of people who had been freed through the foundation's work. "Mom, you should hear how they fight for justice," Ifeanyi said one evening, her eyes glowing. One man was in prison for 10 years for a crime he didn't commit. Can you imagine? Mr. Okafor said lies can destroy lives. Adaora's fork clattered on the plate. The words hit her like stones. She quickly excused herself, locking herself in the bathroom where she pressed trembling hands against her face. Her lies had destroyed Chitty's life. She could not escape the irony that her daughter was now learning about truth and justice from the very man who had once been her victim. It got worse. One Saturday morning, Ifeanyi ran into Adaora's room, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, Mr. Okafor asked me to help with a youth campaign. We'll be designing posters and visiting schools to raise awareness about wrongful imprisonment. Isn't that amazing? Adaora's heart dropped. You mean you'll be spending more time with him? Yes, Mom. Ifeananya hugged her. He's like a mentor already. He says young people like me can change the future. Adaora held her daughter tightly, but tears welled in her eyes. Oh God, not this way, she thought. Don't let my child become tied to my sin. One afternoon, Adaora found herself face to face with Chitty again. It was at a small youth gathering organized by the foundation. Parents were invited, and she had no excuse to stay away since Ifeananya begged her to come. The hall was modest, but filled with energy. Teenagers chattered excitedly. Posters with bold words like truth and justice lined the walls, and volunteers moved about with smiles. Adaora felt like an intruder in a sacred place. Chitty stood at the front, addressing the young people. He spoke with passion, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. Adaora tried to avoid his gaze, but once again his eyes found her. They lingered, piercing, heavy with unspoken words. During a break, Ifeananya proudly dragged her mother toward him. "Sir, this is my mom," she said. "She's my biggest inspiration. Everything I've learned about honesty, I learned from her." Adaora nearly fainted. She could not meet his eyes. Chitty's gaze softened slightly, and for the first time, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Is that so?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Ifeananya said eagerly. "She always says honesty is better than lies. She's the one who makes me want to be better." The irony burned Adaora's soul. She wanted to sink into the ground. Chitty simply nodded and said, "You're fortunate to have such a mother." Adaora excused herself quickly, her heart in shreds. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked around her room in circles, whispering to herself, "How long can I hide? What happens when the truth comes out?" Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ifeananya's proud face saying, "Everything I've learned about honesty, I learned from her." The weight of her hypocrisy pressed down on her until she could barely breathe. A few days later, Chitty requested to see her privately. They met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. "Adaora," he said, his voice steady, "I didn't ask to cross paths with you again. Life did that. But now your daughter is part of my foundation. I won't punish her for your mistakes. She's innocent." Adaora swallowed hard. "Chitty, I never thought this day would come. I thought my past was buried." Chitty leaned forward, his eyes firm. "The past never stays buried. It always waits. But I need you to decide something. Will you continue lying to yourself and to her? Or will you finally face the truth?" Tears filled her eyes. "If I tell her, I'll lose everything. My respect, her trust, my family." Chitty's expression softened slightly, though his voice was still sharp. "And if you don't tell her, you'll lose yourself. One way or another, Adaora, the truth will come out. The only question is, will it come from your lips or from someone else's?" That evening, Adaora sat alone in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She hardly recognized the woman she had become, polished on the outside, fractured on the inside. Her daughter was unknowingly building her future around a man she had once destroyed. Her lies had grown roots, weaving themselves into the life she had built. Now, every passing day tightened the noose around her neck. The twist of fate was cruel. The hero of her daughter's life was the victim of her sins. And Adaora knew, deep down, that the time for hiding was almost over. Adaora had lived with secrets before, but never like this. In her youth, hiding her lies had been almost easy. She was young, careless, and desperate. The people she hurt were far away, and the world was too noisy to notice one young woman's sins. But now, the silence was deafening. Every laugh from her daughter felt like an accusation. Every time Emiko looked at her with trust, her stomach churned with shame. And every time Chitty's eyes met hers across a hall, a meeting, or even from the pages of a pamphlet. She felt like a criminal waiting for judgment. For days, she lived in a blur. She woke, cooked, opened her shop, smiled at customers, and laughed when she needed to. But inside, she was collapsing. The weight of truth pressed on her chest like a boulder. It was a Wednesday afternoon when her phone rang. The name flashed on the screen, Chidi Okafor. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Hello," she whispered. "We need to talk," his voice said firmly. "Tomorrow. My office. 10 in the morning." She wanted to refuse. She wanted to hang up and run far away. But she also knew she couldn't. Her life was already tangled with his return. Avoiding him wouldn't erase what had been done. "All right," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. That night, Adaora could not sleep. She paced the living room while Emeka and Ifeanyi slept peacefully. Every tick of the clock echoed in her head. She thought about the life she had built, the reputation she had polished. She thought about her daughter's proud words. "Everything I've learned about honesty, I learned from her." By dawn, her eyes were swollen with tears. She put on her best outfit anyway, covering her fear with makeup and perfume. She kissed her daughter goodbye, as if it were a final farewell. Chidi's office was not what she expected. It was not extravagant, not flashy. It was simple, neat, with bookshelves stacked with law reports, framed photos of freed prisoners smiling with their families, and inspirational quotes pinned to the walls. One read, "Truth crushed to earth will rise again." When Adaora entered, Chidi was seated at his desk, reading. He looked up, his expression calm but serious. He gestured for her to sit. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Adaora's hands twisted in her lap. Finally, Chidi spoke. "I've waited a long time for this moment," he said quietly. "When I first saw you again, I thought anger would consume me. I thought I'd demand justice, shout, maybe even humiliate you. But when I looked at your daughter, I realized the real punishment is already inside you. You're living with the weight of what you did." Adaora's lips trembled. "Chidi, don't," he interrupted, his voice sharp but not loud. "Don't give me excuses. Don't say you were young, desperate, or misled. I know all of that already. What I want to know is, do you even understand the depth of what you did?" Tears spilled down Adaora's face. "I ruined your life." He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Yes, you destroyed my youth. You took away years I can never get back. I sat in a prison cell while you built a new life. I lost friends, opportunities, and peace of mind. Do you know how it feels to be innocent but locked behind bars because of a lie?" Adaora sobbed openly now. "I'm sorry. I've carried it for years. It has eaten me alive." Chidi's voice softened, though it still carried steel. "Sorry doesn't free the man who lost a decade of his life. But here's the truth. I rebuilt myself. I studied law in prison. I fought for myself. And when I got out, I fought for others. Your lie made me suffer, but it also shaped me into who I am today." Adaora looked up, confused. "Then why call me here?" "Because the question isn't about me anymore," Chidi said firmly. "It's about you. How long will you keep living a lie in front of your daughter and your husband? Do you think you can hide this forever? Do you think she won't find out one day? Through me? Through someone else? Through fate itself?" Adaora shook her head desperately. "Ifeanyi can't know. She admires you. You're her hero. If she discovers what I did, she'll never look at me the same way again." Chidi leaned back, folding his arms. "You can't control that. The truth has a way of breaking chains, but also breaking illusions. If you truly love her, you will give her the truth. Let her choose how to see you. Don't make her live on a lie the way you've lived." Adaora's chest heaved. "But I'll lose her." Chidi's eyes softened. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll gain her in a way you never imagined. Forgiveness is stronger than we think, but it only comes after truth. Without truth, there is nothing." Adaora left his office broken, her makeup streaked with tears. She wandered the streets, her heart heavier than ever. His words echoed in her mind. Without truth, there is nothing. When she returned home, Emeka noticed her swollen eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "Yes." She lied quickly, retreating to the bedroom. But she knew the lie tasted bitter. She couldn't keep this up. That night, she sat at her dressing table, staring at her reflection. Her daughter's laughter floated down the hallway, and her husband's voice hummed in the living room. They trusted her, loved her, looked up to her. Yet her foundation was built on sand. She pressed her forehead against the mirror, whispering to herself, "It's time." The next evening, after dinner, Adaora called her family into the living room. Her voice trembled as she said, "I need to tell you both something important. Something about my past." Emeka looked surprised, but nodded. "Go on." Ifeanyi's bright eyes were curious, innocent, unprepared for the storm about to break. Adaora's heart raced. She looked at her daughter, then at her husband, and whispered, "Before I became who I am today, I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. And one of them changed someone's life forever. It's time you both know the truth." Her hands shook as the words caught in her throat. But for the first time in years, she felt the chains around her chest begin to loosen. The weight of truth was heavy, but at last, she was ready to carry it honestly. The living room was unusually silent. The only sound came from the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Emeka sat with his hands folded, watching his wife closely. Ifeanyi curled up on the sofa, eyes wide with curiosity. Adaora stood before them, her palms clammy, her chest heavy. Her whole body trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Before I became who I am today," she began, her voice shaking, "I was not the woman you know. I was reckless. I was ambitious in a way that destroyed more than it built. And because of my choices, I hurt someone innocent." Emeka frowned. "What do you mean?" Adaora's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her daughter first. "Ifeanyi, you admire Mr. Okafor. You see him as a hero, and he is. But what you don't know is that many years ago, I was the reason he went to prison. He was accused of a crime he didn't commit, and it was my lie that sealed his fate." The words hung in the air like thunder. Ifeanyi gasped. "What?" Emeka sat up straighter, his face darkening. "Adaora, is this some kind of joke?" She shook her head quickly. "No, it's the truth. There was a raid in a hotel. Drugs were found. I was young and foolish, and in my fear, I said his name. He was arrested, and I never spoke up to clear him. He suffered for years while I walked free. I built a new life, but my past followed me like a shadow. And now, it has returned." Silence pressed on the room. Adaora sobbed openly, her shoulders shaking. "I am so sorry for betraying him, for lying, for letting you both believe I was someone without stains. I am not proud of my past. I am ashamed, but I cannot carry the weight alone anymore." Ifeanyi's face turned pale. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, you mean the man I look up to, the one who's teaching me about truth, you're the reason he lost everything?" Adaora nodded miserably. "Yes." Tears spilled down Ifeanyi's cheeks. She buried her face in her hands, her body trembling. Emeka stood up, pacing the room. His voice was low, filled with disbelief. "All these years, you told us about honesty. You spoke like you were blameless. And now I hear this? Adaora, how could you?" Adaora reached out to him, but he pulled back, shaking his head. The hurt in his eyes was sharper than knives. The hours that followed were long and painful. Emeka went to the bedroom in silence, leaving Adaora and her daughter in the living room. Ifeanyi sat stiffly, avoiding her mother's touch. Adaora wept until her tears dried, whispering prayers under her breath. The next morning, Ifeananya refused to eat breakfast. She left for school without a word, her shoulders tense. Emeka barely looked at Adaora before leaving for work. For the first time in years, the house felt like a stranger's home. Days passed in a blur of tension. Adaora carried on with her routine, cooking, cleaning, tending her shop, but the warmth was gone. Her daughter came home from school and locked herself in her room. Emeka stayed longer at work. Adaora felt like a ghost in her own home. One Friday evening, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, Chidi was standing there. He looked calm, but his eyes searched her face. "Can I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Emeka appeared from the living room, surprised to see him. Ifeananya came out of her room, her eyes red from crying. Chidi sat down, his presence filling the room. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he looked at Ifeananya. "Your mother told you the truth, didn't she?" Ifeananya nodded stiffly, her lips pressed tight. Chidi leaned forward. "What she did to me was wrong. It cost me years of my life. But hear me clearly, I don't hate her anymore. I forgave her long ago, because carrying anger was only chaining me to the past. If I had stayed bitter, I would never have built the foundation you admire today." Ifeananya blinked through her tears. "But," she lied, "she ruined everything for you." "Yes," Chidi said gently. "But forgiveness is not about pretending it never happened. It is about choosing to be free. Your mother's past doesn't erase the lessons she's given you. It only shows that she is human, like everyone else, capable of mistakes, capable of change." Ifeanyanya's lips quivered. Slowly, she turned toward her mother. "But Mom, why didn't you tell me earlier?" Adaora's voice broke. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid I'd lose you." Tears streamed down her daughter's cheeks. She stepped forward, her small hands trembling as she reached for Adaora's. "I don't hate you, Mom. I'm hurt, but I don't want to lose you either. Please, don't ever hide the truth from me again." Adaora wept as she pulled her daughter into her arms. For the first time in years, the chains of silence broke. Later that night, Emeka sat with Chidi on the porch. "You had every right to expose her," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Chidi looked out into the night. "Because punishment doesn't always heal. Sometimes mercy does more. I built my life again, not because she was punished, but because I chose to move on. Now she has confessed, and that is enough. The rest is between your family and God." Emeka was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "You're a stronger man than I am." Chidi smiled faintly. "No, just a man who has already carried enough pain." The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were healing. Ifeananya slowly warmed back to her mother, learning to see her not as a perfect role model, but as a flawed human being who had learned the cost of mistakes. Emeka struggled with disappointment, but over time, he chose to stand by his wife, understanding that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about building differently in the present. And Adaora? She learned that hiding sins does not make them disappear. They remain like shadows until the light of truth is shone on them. Months later, at a foundation event, Adaora stood beside her daughter, listening as Chidi spoke to the crowd. He shared his story, not naming her, not pointing fingers, but speaking of betrayal, imprisonment, and eventual freedom. His voice carried not bitterness, but strength. When the applause filled the hall, Ifeananya turned to her mother. She held her hand tightly and whispered, "I'm proud of you for telling me the truth." Adaora's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of release. The sins of yesterday had scarred her life, but they no longer defined her. She had faced the truth, and though the journey was painful, it led her to something she never thought she could have again: peace. And so, Adaora learned the hardest lesson of all, that the lies we tell may protect us for a season, but only truth and courage can set us free. Her sins scarred her yesterday, but her honesty shaped her tomorrow. What about you? Are there secrets you're still running from? Remember, the past may whisper, but it never forgets. Until next time, stay true, stay strong, and keep listening for stories that teach and transform.